all of you come from humiliated origins. In other words, Allah is saying that human beings' start in this world is something embarrassing, and the only reason we have honor in this world is because Allah gave it to us. The first group of questions, didn't we destroy the earliest nations, and didn't we follow them up with later nations that came? Now, on that particular question, there are two interpretations, and we discussed one of them. One of those interpretations was that this is referring to nations that were destroyed when prophets came. Right? That was one interpretation. And we discussed that. We looked at the ayat in the Quran where the people of Nuh denied and then Allah replaced them with another nation and another nation. Right? That was one set of interpretations. There is another set of interpretations, and that is that this is referring to all nations. Earlier nations were destroyed, killed, or died, and then others came and took their place. There were ancient empires. Even today, there are ruins of different empires, and later on, other people come and take their place. So, this has been going on throughout history. This is something that is found as a living phenomenon, and anybody who studies history knows this now to understand that a little bit better. I am going to kind of summarize a formula that Ibn Khaldun had. I think his idea has a lot of merit. He basically looks at human civilization and divides it. I am going to use my own words to describe Khaldun. So, if you read Khaldun, you will find the smart version. I am going to give you the dumb version. Okay? So, the dumb version is, you basically have city people and you have village people. Okay? There are people that live on the farm in the village and in the mountains, etc. It's that life. And then there are people that live in cities. The people that live in villages or in the desert, the tribal life, those people have a very strong sense of connection to their neighbors and to their family. They have a very strong connection to their history and their family tree. My grandfather was this, his grandfather was this, his grandfather was this. They are very proud of their heritage. They are very careful about protecting the family, protecting the tribe, and protecting the culture. They are very simple. And they are also very principled. We don't do things like this here. We do things like this here. They are very big on respect and honor. Honor is a big deal to them. Tradition is a big deal to them. Loyalty is a big deal to them. And if they are enemies with someone, they are hard enemies, and they are going to stay enemies for many generations. All of these things come with village life, and this village life has existed in civilizations around the world, including Arabia. Arabia is no different from that. The culture existed there, but this also exists in Afghanistan and Indonesia, or anywhere you go in the world, you are going to find this kind of phenomenon. But then, they have a very, like I said, strong sense of identity. And they don't have much government. This is another important thing. They don't have much government. So they have a lot of emphasis on morals. It's not the government, the police, the cameras, or the taxes making you do the right thing. It's the way you were brought up and the expectations of your elders, your family, and your community. We have our morals. We have our code. And we live by this code. That is the life of the Bedouins, the farmers, and the village people. But then society advances. Some of those villages start growing into cities, and they start becoming more civilized and developed. City life is driven not by family, but by economic functions. You don't necessarily inherit the family business. The son wants to become a carpenter. One wants to learn poetry. One wants to become an artist. One wants to become an architect, or whatever else. Now you are moving to the city for economic reasons, and most of the time you are cut off from the larger family. It is also more expensive to live in a city, so the whole family can't afford to move. Even if they do move, they move closer to their work. You can't just get together and do the same work because economic forces are pushing you apart. So, family life starts breaking up. And this has been happening for generations. This is not something new. The very rich can buy big houses, mansions, and villas, and they can stay together with their whole family. But for most others, they go to work, their family lives somewhere else, and they live somewhere else. They are doing the work and sending the money back, or some kind of disconnect has happened. Of course, you are also familiar with the modern version. People are going, for example, to New York to study at New York University. Is their whole family moving with them? No, somebody gets a job as a programmer and moves to a big corporation's head office in downtown Melbourne. Sydney, Paris, or London. Is the whole family able to move with them? No. They are barely able to afford the rent for themselves to make ends meet, and they are going to be isolated. Now, there is a group of single people, young people, and business people. They are not brought together by family, values, history, or heritage. That is not what brought them together. Economics brought them together. The company brought them together, the job brought them together, or the government brought them together. Which do you think is a stronger sense of connection to other human beings? The tribal connection or the city connections? By far, the tribal connections are stronger. So, what cities do is they start creating people that live in cities. They start developing a more and more individualistic worldview. They think first about themselves and at most about one or two more people. Even if things go too far, their parents or their children might become a burden for them. And that is happening nowadays, right? People are saying, I don't want to have kids. Why should I have kids? It's too much work. I'm happy the way I am. Hyper-individualism happens. When that individualism happens, that society is not unified. They are not united because they are each a bunch of individuals looking for their own thing, whereas tribes are very, very united. These individual people also don't have a unified moral code. They don't have one thing that ties them together to say, we are all going to follow these rules. The only reason they follow the rules is who's watching? Are the cops watching? Is the government watching? Am I going to get fired? That is the reason they are following the rules. So, what happens is these societies that don't have a strong, the word is a bad word, but it's also a good word, bond with each other, start becoming weak. Strength comes with unity. And these societies, the more they develop, the more disunited they become. Compare that to the village. You have connections with your whole family. You know your neighbor. And you know your neighbor's neighbor's neighbor. You go to Friday prayer, you know everybody. You go to Eid, you know everybody. Some people who live here, maybe from a village in Algeria or Tunisia, and you go there for the first time, you are 18 years old, you have never been there before, and you meet some old man at the masjid. He asks, what's your name? And you say it, and he says, oh, I know your uncle, I know this one, I know that one. You think, how do you know all these people? I don't even know my own uncle. It's because they are all connected. Over time, these developed societies start becoming weaker. And there is a friction between them and the tribal societies. Usually, because money is flowing into the cities, poverty is created in the villages. So as the cities get richer, the villages get poorer. Eventually, this economic and social friction, and by the way, city people think of village people as inferior, gets big enough that the village people rebel, they fight, they win over the city people, and they form a new government. They get rid of the elite and form a new society, saying this society is going to be based on our principles of justice. But now, over time, they become the new city, they become hyper-individualistic, and by the time they do that, the people they left behind come and attack them. This cycle continues. A nation is closest to destruction when the rich in the cities become so wealthy that they are worried about losing their wealth. Even though cities have nice buildings and streets, they start getting filled with poor neighborhoods and crime. And the rich start getting worried. What they do is they start saving their money more and more, hoarding it in safes, and concentrating wealth in the hands of a few. It creates a massive class divide. You might have heard the term bourgeoisie, and eventually there will be a revolution and violence against those who are hoarding all the wealth. This is actually a cycle that goes on in the world. Now, the Quran comes along and targets the political and financial elite. You can see why they start becoming a cancer in society. Are there not major corporations and CEOs of a couple hundred corporations in the world that are now holding maybe 60, 70, or 80% of the entire world's wealth while people are starving? Is that not the case? This is the new version of that. When that reaches a tipping point, revolutions happen and a new cycle begins. When Allah says this, it is when people reach a certain level of arrogance. Jawad and I were discussing a Vice documentary he saw about people who work on yachts. The hotel industry workers and the yacht workers were both talking about how it's the worst when the super rich come. Because when the super rich come, there are no rules. You see them do the worst things, they have the most immoral behavior. They treat other human beings like insects. You have never seen worse human beings than the super duper rich when they are partying among each other. You see behaviors you couldn't imagine. And that is their normal when they are let loose. The Quran uses two words for these people. Mutrafin, people who are drowned in luxury. They are like, oh my God, my helicopter is late. That mentality leads to destruction. Allah is saying there is a cycle, and when you hit that cycle, your own wealth and luxury become the reason you get destroyed. It leads to your own destruction. When he says this, it is tied to this reality. Especially for those at the top of the societies that fell, the ultimate downfall falls upon them. Now we get to this really heavy question. There was the question about nations that rise and fall, or the nations against the prophets who got annihilated. Those were the two interpretations. But now Allah says, didn't we create you from a weak liquid? From weak water? That would be a raw translation. The first thing you notice is, we are coming back to you. The previous ayah said, we destroyed the earliest ones and we will make others follow in the same path. Because that's how we deal with criminals. Who are the next ones going to follow in the same path? The Quraysh. Now it's time to talk to the Quraysh directly. He addresses them and says, didn't we create you from weak water? He is referring to sperm. Isn't that where you came from? The word mahin is really interesting. It is related to weakness, like to weaken somebody. They used to use the word mahin for a horse that couldn't breed anymore. So, the horse that has become infertile is mahin. Allah uses the word for infertile to describe pregnancy, which is odd because you would expect a word for fertile. Allah is using the word infertile to describe the process as if to say even what is sitting inside the womb of the mother to be isn't itself capable of doing what it does. It's too weak. Allah is the one who gives it the power to produce life. The water itself was weak. There is another important consideration here. The Arabs were very proud of their heritage, their fathers, and their tribes. Every poem began by talking about their fathers. In the Quran, Allah says, let me tell you something about your father's weak water. That is pretty insulting, isn't it? If you are coming from a poor family, you may not find this insulting because the rich people insult you all the time anyway. But if you are one of the elites, nobody looks you in the eye. And now you are being told, weren't you made from weak water? That's a direct insult to their lineage. So, what is behind this question? Sometimes a question is loaded. It has kinaya in it. Let's explain how this question is loaded. First of all, are you made from some different liquid than the people who died before you? Because they were also made from water. They came and went and they were destroyed. Are you made from some superfluid that you aren't going to be destroyed? Is that the idea? Are you made from a higher origin than the people you consider inferior? Were you made from some special non-weak fluid that other people weren't created from? All of your origins are the same. All of you are the same. All of you come from humiliated origins. In other words, Allah is saying human beings' start in this world is something embarrassing. And the only reason we have honor in this world is because Allah gave it to us. If Allah had not given it to us, our starting point is humiliation. You are in this position of power, and you think you are so powerful, so rich, and nobody can look you in the eye or question your leadership. But were you always like this? You weren't. Even when you were inside your mom, you were like this. I want you to use your imagination for a second. There was a time when I, you, and everybody in this room were somewhere inside our mother's belly. At some point, she didn't even know we were there. My mom didn't know I was there. But I was. Were you even something worthy of being mentioned? In fact, even your mother, who loves you so much, didn't know you existed. You were nothing to her. She had no emotional attachment to you, no love for you, and no nothing. You were inside there, this little drop, and you started to form. As you started to form, I can't remember what that was like. Imagine. I don't have a mouth. I don't have eyes. I don't have hands. I'm just stuck in this place. You are just between these organs, sitting there, completely, utterly helpless. Is that a state of power? No, the womb itself is actually pretty humiliating, and I was utterly powerless. Did I deserve to be engineered? Did I deserve to get my eyes developed, my hands, my fingers, my feet, my body, my mind, my tongue, my teeth, all the bones being developed, the ears being developed? Did I earn that? Am I entitled to any of that? When you say, I got money, that's why I deserve to be treated better. Did you deserve to be engineered the way you were inside your mother? You weren't even remembered by anybody. Where did your deserve come from? Where did your rightfulness come from? It is the most humbling thing. And not only is it humbling, but from a believer's perspective, it should make me and you extremely grateful, Ya Allah. I was nothing. This is my origin. And the number of things that can go wrong in a pregnancy, not just between life and death, but deformities, brain deficiencies, disabilities, genetic disorders, miscarriage, premature delivery is vast. And yet here we are, and Allah is asking us, so you think you got here on your own? After asking this question, isn't it true that this is a strange thing? It's like we didn't have a life. We weren't alive, and Allah started creating us out of nothing. We didn't have an existence, and Allah brought us to life. So we were resurrected. If the question in the surah is about being brought back to life, it's as if Allah is saying, didn't I already do that to you? Haven't I already resurrected you from a fluid? Why do you think it's difficult for me to resurrect you from the dirt? It's just a continuation of the same phenomenon.